But it was 1 or 2 appeals a month previously with that general subject. Now it's about 400 a month.
It's
right?
That's the approximate
that's
number.
Huge. That's
yes.
huge.
And the Illinois Supreme Court has gone on record as saying that this is essentially crushing the appellate court's ability to do its job.
Far too often under this dome, we forget about the victims. In the committees that I'm in, whether it's restorative justice, criminal, Jude criminal, the victims are often never spoken about. And when we bring them up, are told, we'll get to them. They should be thought of first.
We are the nation's #1 producer of soybeans, #2 producer of corn. We're responsible for 90% of the U.S. oilseed production, which leaves us with a wealth of feedstock supply. We're in the top 3 states for ethanol production, top 6 for feedstock production overall.
And we want someday to be able to have a retirement with dignity. We want to work, we want the value that comes with work, but we someday want to be able to stop working and enjoy our golden years. So we think that this legislation passed by the federal government is great for 2 reasons. It encourages more people to save for their kids' future and allows planning for retirement as well.
Just a handful of us that worked for him post-presidency, and so I really got a great chance to interact with this man closely and personally over the course of the decade from 1989 to 1999.
That's all just ahead in this week's edition of the Illinois Channel.
Hi, I'm Bob Myers, president of the Associated Beer Distributors of Illinois. You know, there have been many increases in the number of choices of beers now available in the marketplace. Independent beer distributors offer consumers thousands of craft, domestic, and imported beers from over 3,000 breweries. Whether you're purchasing beer in a restaurant, a grocery store, or a convenience store, it's the beer distributors that make the delivery, keep track of the inventory, and ensure that the product you are buying is fresh. We're also responsible for recording how much beer is sold and ensuring that the state taxes on those sales are collected. And because we want everyone to drink responsibly, beer distributors play the central role in the 3-tier system that regulates beer from the brewery to its distribution and final sale at a retail location. Working in a highly regulated industry is just one reason we also support the work of the Illinois Channel. When new laws are proposed, new taxes, or new regulations, we all need to stay connected to know how these proposals may change how we live and work. I'm Bob Myers, president of the Associated Beer Distributors of Illinois, who are proud to help keep you connected.
Public Affairs very much thanks Residco, our sole corporate underwriter, for helping to make the production of this show possible.
Need to be able to have judges who are going to go through that process and make that determination. Is this person too dangerous to someone or to the community to be released? Is this person likely to be a willful flight risk? And then the important part that people don't understand is when that determination is made, that criminal defendant has a right to ask the appellate court, nevertheless, to let that person out of jail. We are a nation of laws to apply fair decisions that get decided the same way for everyone. Basic fairness. That's what we're looking for from our courts.
So that's the court. Welcome to Public Affairs. Look, a great show today. We are speaking with Judge Kenton Skarin, and he is running, he's a trial judge in DuPage County and Circuit Court of DuPage County, and he is running for the appellate court in the state of Illinois in the 3rd District. There are about 56 or so appellate judges in the state of Illinois. There are 7 in the 3rd District when he's running. But, you know, the important thing is a major matter that concerns almost everybody in the state of Illinois to a varying degree is crime. And we'll start out talking about crime because crime is a major issue for trial judges where Judge Skarin practices in DuPage. And it's a major issue if he's elected to the 3rd District of the Appellate Court in the state of Illinois. And why is that so, Judge Scarin?
Well, Jeff, it's because right now, after the Safety Act went into effect on September 18th of last year, since that time, the appellate courts have gotten buried by appeals. What people don't understand is that you can appeal a detention determination and ask the appellate court to let you out of jail. There have been 2,000 of those requests just in the first 5 months that the law was in effect.
And that, putting that perspective, in the decade before,
Yes.
before that Safety Act was passed last fall, or became effective last fall, how many appeals were there on detention issues?
There were 171 in 10 years. So 17 or so times a year on average, somebody would ask for a bond determination to be modified.
Right.
Now, in the last 5 months, after the Safety Act went into effect, we've had 2,000.
Dealing the bond decision, pretty similar, we'll get into that in more detail, to the detention decision, but it was 1 or 2 appeals a month previously with that general subject. Now it's about 400 a month. Right?
That's the approximate
that's
number.
Huge. That's
yes.
huge.
And the Illinois Supreme Court has gone on record as saying that this is essentially crushing the appellate court's ability to do its job. They're just not set up to handle that kind of volume. So this is a major issue that is immediately impacting not just the criminal area, but also the appellate court's ability to do all of the other important work it does.
So we'll come back to that. I want to give you a little bit more background, or let Judge Scarin tell us a little bit more about your relevant background, because you grew up in Wheaton, right?
I did.
In fact, you spent almost your entire life in
I've lived in Wheaton my entire life, except for a couple of times I went across country to work for a couple of federal appellate judges.
So, and you went to North Central College in Naperville, right?
I did.
Graduated, bachelor's in history.
Bachelor's
with
in
honors.
history, summa cum laude from North Central in Naperville. Yes, sir.
Took a little time off from school to be a trader, not spelled Trader, a bond trader?
I did. I worked in fixed income securities for about 2.5 years or so, and then I had the chance to go back to Northwestern Law School on a full academic scholarship.
So you've always done well academically, and that's important. Why? Why is that important? I mean, you did pretty well at Northwestern Law School, would you say?
I did. I graduated first in my class from Northwestern University School of Law.
So that's first in a class of 200.
About 240, 245 my year, but yes.
Important, leapfrogging ahead, because that gives you a shot at having an important clerkship, working essentially side by side with either an important federal appellate judge, which you did.
I did.
Yeah, with
Yes.
Judge J. Harvey Wilkinson, right?
That's correct. So if you do really well at a really good law school, you're at least eligible to apply to work for a federal court of appeals judge. I was lucky enough to do that for J. Harvey Wilkinson on the Federal Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, which covers all of Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, North and South Carolina.
So people know, if you're a law student, you know, well, it's clerking for the fourth federal court district, appellate district, Fourth Circuit.
Fourth
okay?
Circuit Court of Appeals.
That's it. But clerking means you're working side by side. You're working with Judge Wilkinson and cranking out opinions and helping him think through these things. You're getting some interaction with the other judges on that Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals.
That's correct.
It's a big deal, because you are running to be, what are you running for here?
Running for the appellate court in the 3rd District, which is all of DuPage County, all of Will County, all of Iroquois, Kankakee, Grundy, Bureau, and LaSalle County. So 2 million people basically west of Chicago and south of Chicago.
So this is like a job interview. We're helping you because you, the voters, the people watching this, and we hope we can get this around so a lot of people can see this in the 3rd District, because all of you, it's 2 million people the population is about 2 million in the 3rd District. They're probably going to be, come November 5, about 1 million registered voters voting on you as a Republican. You run as a Republican, your opponent is a Democrat, right?
That's correct.
You're not political as a judge, but the Constitution sets this up in Illinois, that elections will be voting for our judges, in the circuit courts and in the appellate court and in the Supreme Court. Is that right?
Yeah, it's actually one of the questions I get a lot, Jeff, is why on earth do we elect judges on a partisan ballot? And it's a fair question. When voters ask that question, they're right. It makes no sense to have partisan judges, but that's the system we have, and so that's the system we're working with. But it's an important point because judges are supposed to follow the law regardless of the politics and regardless of the politics of the people who show up in their courtrooms. I would never in my courtroom rule against somebody because they're a Democrat or because they're a Republican. Frankly, that would be insulting to even suggest, but that's the system we have, so we have to work with it.
Because it's said that justice is blind. What does that mean? The blind lady, what's that all about?
It's a symbol that we have used for hundreds of years as Americans to show that it doesn't matter when you show up into court what your politics are, who you are as a person, what your background is. You get fair justice, and the way you know you get fair justice is all of us together pass rules ahead of time that judges swear an oath to follow when they apply in a particular case.
So Lady Justice is the physical symbol. Lady Justice is wearing a blindfold, is that right?
That's the traditional way of expressing
So
it,
she
yes.
doesn't see, and Justice doesn't see, any of the particulars. You will usually have two parties. They could be corporations, they could be individuals, but what's the slogan that works? What are you running on if it's a slogan of the kind of law you try to practice?
Look, we need to have courts that are faster, that are smarter, that are fairer, and unfortunately, that is not always the case in Illinois. Look, Illinois has some of the most broken government in America, and it's an embarrassment to us as Illinoisans. And what we have an opportunity to do is we have the opportunity to make our courts fairer. And what that means is we need courts that are simply going to follow the law and let the chips fall. There's a reason judges wear black robes. They don't wear red robes. They don't wear blue robes. They wear black robes. And that symbolism that the courts have with Lady Justice, with the robes that judges wear, is important because it signifies you are supposed to get justice regardless of who you are and regardless of what your background is under the law.
So you're running for this. The people who can vote for you, they have to be registered to vote in one of 7 counties, right?
That's correct.
What are those 7 counties again?
All of DuPage County, all of Will County, Grundy, Iroquois, LaSalle, Bureau, Kankakee counties.
But you're not running to represent any particular, not DuPage.
No.
You happen to have lived in DuPage all your life, but you're trying to give the cases that are going to come to you are going to presumably in large part, if not exclusively, from from matters that arose in the trial
Sure.
courts of those 7 counties, and they will come to the 3rd district because they have a right of appeal.
That's correct.
An automatic right of appeal to take anything that happens in those trial courts. They can appeal that to the judgeships or the 7 judges.
Right. So
that
Jeff,
you're running to be one of those 7 judges.
let me sort of take a step back and just give people a quick background as to how our court structure works. You've got trial courts where I currently sit as a judge. I've been a judge on the trial court for 5 years. Anything that happens in that trial court, whether it's a criminal matter, whether it's a divorce matter, whether it's a lawsuit between 2 companies, whether it's a traffic ticket, anything that happens there, you can ask the judges upstairs on the appellate court to look over the shoulder of the trial judge. It's like replay review for sports. And then above the appellate court is the state Supreme Court, and then above that is the United States Supreme Court. Right. And I've worked in any and all levels of that, including earlier in my career, I worked at the United States Supreme Court.
Yeah, we didn't get there, but after you worked for Judge Wilkinson, a year or so after, you then applied for a clerkship with the United States Supreme Court.
Correct.
Even apply, it's enormously competitive and selective. Each justice, there are 9, of course, justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. Each has 4 clerks, right?
That's correct.
And you apply to all of the justices on the Supreme Court and hoping you get one?
You do. You're applying for one of 36 spots. You better apply to all 9 of them. And so I did.
And you got one. Who was that justice?
I did. I clerked for Clarence Thomas.
So how well do you know the process on the Supreme Court in terms of working with them? how these opinions are considered or deliberated on and then written? How well do you know that process?
Considering that was my job, I know it very well. What people don't understand is there's no permanent legal staff at either the Federal Court of Appeals where I worked or at the U.S. Supreme Court where I worked. There's the judge or justice, and then they'll typically have 3 or 4 law clerks, and those 4 or 5 individuals do all of the substantive legal work. So there are if an opinion needs to be written, the law clerk writes it in conjunction with the judge, making sure they're doing what the judge wants, and then that's how the process works. So to your question, I'm very familiar with how that appellate process works.
Yeah, so you are extraordinarily familiar. Perhaps we'll have your opponent on. I'm not pushing people one way or the other, but we're examining your qualifications. And it would seem if somebody examined the qualifications to be an appellate judge here in the state of Illinois, well, what's this guy done? Has he done appellate work? Yes, on the federal appellate level, on the U.S. Supreme Court. And people might say, well, what do you know about how it would work in the state of Illinois on the 3rd District? How similar is that process?
The process in how an appellate court works is similar throughout the country, both federal and appellate, and federal and state. And the other thing is, my entire practice after I left the Supreme Court up until the time when I went on the bench was a uniquely appellate practice. When you work at the Supreme Court, it's a little bit like getting picked for the all-star team in your rookie year. And then after that, you have the opportunity. So I went and worked for one of the largest law firms in the world, and my job was I was in the appellate group. So what I did is I practiced throughout the country doing appeals in different courts in different locations.
And that was at Jones Day.
That's at Jones Day.
One of the largest worldwide law firms based here in the United States, but in terms of offices around the world.
The firm had, at the time I was there, 42 offices on 5 continents.
And so back to detention. Tell
Sure.
us a little bit about the law. You're a trial judge in DuPage, and under the new law, the Safety Act, when a person is arrested, what happens? How does that relate to detention?
Well, that person is required to be brought in front of a trial judge like myself within a very short period of time. It's depending on what the charge is, 24 to 48 hours. And then the judge has to make a determination as to whether that individual is let out onto the street or whether that individual stays in jail while they're awaiting their trial.
He has to make a determination as to whether this individual should be released.
Correct.
And what are the criteria that the Safety Act sends out? I think they do. As to the law, what are the criteria that the trial court judge in the first instance would look at to make that determination?
Well, there are a number of criteria, but the starting point is whether the particular crime that has been charged even is one that is eligible for someone to be detained, because the state legislature made some decisions about what types of crimes could or could not be detained.
So these are presumably the more serious crimes, the more serious likelihood that the person arrested might be dangerous to the community if he were released or she were released.
That's probably a fair shorthand.
Dangerous, yeah.
Yes, because within the list of crimes, and you can kind of think of them in terms of, there's obviously a long list, but think of them in terms of, did somebody get killed or did somebody get hurt very badly? Those are the types of crimes that people can be detained for, or was there a threat of violence involved? In those instances, what people don't understand is that even in those instances, the state prosecutor, the state's attorney, must ask the judge to detain the person before the judge has any discretion to make that decision at all. So that's your next step on the road.
The state's attorney is key, because if he or she doesn't ask, the judge can't on his own make the decision to detain, right?
That's correct. The judge can be sitting there and the judge could see anything up to and including first-degree murder. And if the state's attorney has not asked to have that individual detained, the judge has no choice.
So when the prosecutor, if they ask, then there has to be a hearing. They make their case, presumably the defense counsel or the
You have a right to appointed counsel.
Yeah, so there will be a clash of ideas, and the prosecutor will make his or her case, That's the state's attorney or assistant state's attorney for that county.
That's correct.
And then the public defender or the private defense counsel will make the case for that defendant being released, having his or her freedom. Do I get that right?
That's in layman's terms, that's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what you're doing now.
And the determination that's made is is this individual a threat to another individual or to the community, or is this individual a willful flight risk? And you can get much more nuanced than that, but those are the two general buckets that the trial court is looking at. And then obviously once that determination is made, you go from there. You need to have judges who are very focused in applying the law properly so that individuals who should be detained will be detained. And you need to remember there is obviously a presumption of innocence that everyone, when they're accused of a crime, is entitled to. But at the same time, you need to be able to have judges who are going to go through that process and make that determination. Is this person too dangerous to someone or to the community to be released? Is this person likely to be a willful flight risk? And then the important part that people don't understand is when that determination is made, that criminal defendant has a right to ask the appellate court, nevertheless, to let that person out of jail.
Yeah, because the appellate court is backstopping that decision. Right?
Correct.
Because they're looking at it and saying, because he or she, as the defendant, has the right to ask, and it goes to the appellate court, and then you folks, one of you, or there are 7 in the 3rd district, a panel of three
makes that decision, yes.
Will make a decision. Did they get it right? And it could, if they decided yes, the trial judge decided should be detained. Well, if they got it wrong, you would decide no, there really wasn't a danger here. In some of the cases, the prosecutor may have asked for detention, and he or she didn't get it, and the prosecutor could appeal.
That's
and
correct.
Say, this person's too dangerous to let out. The judge decided he should. We're asking you to reverse that. Right?
You've laid out generally what that process looks like. Right. Yes, the bottom line is appellate courts exist to fix mistakes that are made at the trial court. That's the whole reason we have them. And when the appellate court is looking at that question in the context of detention under the Safety Act, they are making a determination of one of two things. Either a criminal defendant was found to be too dangerous to release or was a flight risk. Was that decision correct? Question 2, in the event that the trial court decided someone was not too dangerous to release and the state's attorney disagreed and asked for a review of that, the appellate court can say, no, this person was too dangerous. This person needs to stay in jail pending trial. Those are the two decisions the appellate court has to make in the pretrial detention context.
And to make that decision whether you're a trial judge or whether you're an appellate judge, to go either way, you don't do it just willy-nilly.
No.
There is the Safety Act, which sets out criteria, and then there may be other cases, precedent, that apply. Is that the gamut, or is there anything else you would look at as a trial judge or as an appellate judge?
Those are going to be the main things that you're looking at. Statutory text, the record that the trial court created when it made its detention determination, and then any similar cases, including state Supreme Court review cases or other appellate court cases that might have similar facts to what you're dealing with. Those are the general framework. And the question that you need to be asking and that voters need to be asking is a judge going to apply the law wherever that law takes them? Or is that judge, as many judges do, saying expressly, I want to be a politician, vote for me because of my party affiliation? If a judge is saying that, they don't understand what a judge does, because they're telling you that partisanship is more important. I can promise you, the voters of Illinois, the voters of the 3rd District, the only thing that matters to me is passing fair judgment based on the laws that all of you put into effect through your legislators. That's my commitment. That's what I will do. So the product on a trial court is pretty straightforward. Your job as a trial court is to help people resolve disputes that they can't resolve themselves. The overwhelming majority of cases settle because people want to control their destiny. They want to be able to have control over how their cases get resolved. If that doesn't work, then you deal with a trial. And ultimately a decision is rendered as to who's guilty or innocent, whether somebody's liable or not, whether somebody has to pay a fine, whether somebody does jail time, whatever that may be. That's the trial court. The second piece of your question is, what does an appellate court do? An appellate court, people don't understand typically, it's a writing job. People think of lawyers and juries and witnesses and my cousin Vinny and all of those things. That's trial court. Once you get to the appellate court, all of the decisions as to what happened have been made. And the appellate court is looking over the shoulder of the trial court and is ultimately writing an opinion that says, yes, everything was done correctly, or no, there were mistakes made and here's how we need to fix them. That's the product a trial court, or I'm sorry, an appellate court puts out.
The generic thing is, you want a judge, trial judge or appellate judge, to be applying the law to the facts. And the law could be in statutes, it could be in the Constitution, that's the law. Isn't that what you want? As opposed to saying, put them all in jail, lock them up, or let them all out. That's not applying the law to the facts.
No, it's not.
But there are some people who might do that. We don't want that, do we?
I have no idea what other people might do, but that would be, what you just described would be the opposite of justice.
Because you want
Because
to be
we-
applying, you want to be doing what generically?
We are a nation of laws to apply fair decisions that get decided the same way for everyone. Basic fairness. That's what we're looking for from our courts.
So that's the core question people are asking. Is this guy who's currently a judge in DuPage County and wants to be an appellate judge on the 3rd District, can they trust you? Does he have the qualifications? Does he understand justice and how we deliver justice? And is he fair? Is that pretty much the questions that you should be asking?
That's certainly a very important question. And the way I would be looking at that, if I'm a voter, frankly, ask the lawyers who show up in my courtroom. And the good news is we don't have to go out and ask them individually, because they did a bar poll where the lawyers went and asked all the lawyers were asked, how does Judge Scarin do his job? And the lawyers who responded gave me the highest marks of anybody running for this office in categories like impartiality, legal knowledge, meets the requirements of office, integrity. Those are the people who show up in front of me every single day. And I'm actually very proud and very honored that they thought that and were willing to say that about me.
So we're taping this on March 25. We just finished the primary. You didn't have any opposition in your primary, but now you're officially the nominee of the Republican Party for this particular seat.
That's
There
correct.
are 7 seats in the 3rd District. You're running for this one seat, and there's a Democrat running against you, right?
That's correct.
And that'll be decided on November 5.
One of the things I hear a lot from people is, I just don't know who to vote for judge. And that's a fault of the candidates. That's a fault of the candidates not going out and explaining to the people who they are and what they believe and how they think the job should be done.
But if they will go to your website,
JudgeKenton.com.
JudgeKenton.com.
Yeah.
JudgeKenton.com. So you're going with your first name, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, because that's okay. They can call you Judge Kenton. They can call you Kenton. Probably wouldn't mind. But most people say Your Honor, Judge, right?
Most people do. My rule is, if you run into me on the street, don't call me Judge. It's in a courtroom, that's fine.
Kenton does it.
Kenton does it.
And the thing is, when they go to your website, they might not find this in other websites. You go through a lot of what it takes to be an appellate judge.
I do.
You go through how you get to the Supreme Court as a law clerk.
I do.
You go through all of this stuff. A lot of this stuff, it's kind of redundant, okay? If you watch the show, you know it, but you may want to reinforce it. And you're going to be out there.
Well, let me put it this way. My commitment to the voters when I started running was they need to be able to understand what an appellate court is, what an appellate court does, why it matters, what makes a good judge. So those are all things that I've laid out and tried to explain on my website, JudgeKenton.com, so that people can understand who to vote for. Because all of you, the voters watching, you want to understand who to vote for. And too often, that information's just not available. So I've done my best to present to you what it is that matters and how I think that you should be making your decisions.
And so we'll just wrap with, we've talked about the detention, we've talked about crime, we've talked about how important that detention decision is, because number one, you detain, if you do it right, the dangerous people. And so they can be locked up for a long time because there can be days, months, years between arrest and trial, right?
Sure, you have a speedy trial right, but often that will get told for various reasons.
Right. So
You
it
could
takes
spend a
while.
very long time in jail waiting trial.
And so you want to make sure you get that right. On the other hand, you don't want somebody out when they should, if they are dangerous or they are a flight risk. So when you're voting for, this is one of numerous issues that you're deciding now as a judge, you would be deciding as an appellate judge if elected, and they want to make sure, these voters, that you get these things right, because here, if they get it wrong on the trial level, you're the backstop. And if you get it wrong, then the Illinois Supreme Court backstops, and then occasionally it goes to the U.S. Supreme Court. So there are lots of backstopping, but it helps if you get it right down either at the trial level or at the initial appellate
It
level.
helps to get it right at the first time. And the other thing people need to understand is you have an absolute right to appeal from the trial court to the appellate court that I'm running for. Subject to some limited exceptions, you don't have a right to go to the state Supreme Court or to the U.S. Supreme Court. People like to say, I'm taking it to the Supreme Court. Well, you have a right to take it to the appellate court.
Right.
Beyond that, in most instances, it's up to the Supreme Court as to whether they want to take your case.
Okay.
So it's very important to have judges who are going to do it right, do it fair, and do it with excellence on our courts.
All right, just thank you so much, Judge Kenton Skarin, for coming here and elaborating and informing and educating. And thank you for watching the show. Come on back to Public Affairs. We hope to be doing perhaps 4 or 5 with Judge Kenton Skarin as he runs in this election that will be ultimately have an election day of November 5, but as you said 40 days before. So the point is, he said it's important to get it right. It's important that you get it right as a voter. It's important that you get informed and you know enough to vote to make the best possible decision. Come back next week and every week to Public Affairs.
Good afternoon. I'm State Representative Patrick Windhorst. I currently serve as the House Republican Floor Leader and as the Republican Ranking Member on the House Judiciary Criminal Committee and the House Restorative Justice Committee. I previously served as Massac County State's Attorney for 14 years. I was honored when Leader McCombie asked me to head up the House Republican Truth and Public Safety Working Group last year. The working group was tasked with developing a legislative package designed to move in the current General Assembly and aimed at improving public safety, holding those who commit crime accountable, and supporting our police following the passage of the well-known Safety Act. This week marks the 6-month anniversary of full implementation of the Safety Act. House Republicans warned against the passage of the Safety Act because of problematic provisions in the law that make the work of law enforcement officials harder to do, and because the law will make our communities less safe. We oppose the ending of cash bail. We opposed anonymous complaints against police officers. We oppose the very nature of the way the bill was passed. 4 attempts at trailer legislation still haven't fixed the issues with the Safety Act. Now that the end of cash bail is in place, we have seen numerous reports from throughout the state of individuals committing crimes, being let out of jail shortly thereafter, and then offending again while they were awaiting their court date. It doesn't have to be this way. Illinoisans deserve to know that when a perpetrator commits a crime, they are going to be held accountable. And most certainly, they won't be back on the streets just a few hours later. Since the inception of the Truth and Public Safety Working Group in 2023, the group has met with law enforcement groups, retired judges, state's attorneys, and other stakeholders to develop our legislative package. Last year, many legislators on the Republican side held roundtables with law enforcement officers and prosecutors. We heard their concerns and crafted legislation to address them. In 2023, our group introduced over 20 bills, and this year the group has introduced over 15 bills. The legislative package focuses on supporting and protecting crime victims, giving judges wider discretion to detain people charged with felonies, and recruiting and retaining law enforcement officers while ensuring they are able to do their jobs. I have a few bills I want to highlight. First, House Bill 5120 widens the possible detention net to all felonies and also establishes the burden of proof at the detention hearing to a preponderance of the evidence. House Bill 5121 calls for the revocation of pretrial release when a defendant is charged with an offense while on pretrial release. House Bill 5126 restores the process for a court to issue a warrant for the defendant's failure to appear in court. The package of bills we have introduced would move Illinois forward toward a brighter and safer future. We can get this done. We need willing partners from the other side of the aisle to join us so we can make Illinois a safer place for everyone that wants to live here, work here, and raise a family here. With that, I will now turn it over to State Representative John Cabello.
Good afternoon. I'm State Representative John Cabello, also an Assistant Minority Leader. My district is the number 90, and I'm honored to serve it. It includes Winnebago County, Stevenson County, and Boone County. Also, I'm a 30-year law enforcement officer, and currently with the Rockford Police Department as a detective. I'd like to note that our Chief Carla Redd is here with us today as well. So not only is my time serving as a police department what motivates me to be an active participant in protecting public safety, but the concerning trend we see here in Illinois where criminals are treated better than law-abiding citizens. The crimes we see plaguing our state are truly tough to digest. Even as a police officer for 30 years, I'm disgusted that we haven't found a way. When we wake up, we watch the news. We read the headlines. We see violent criminals who are often repeat offenders commit heinous, brutal crime to innocent victims. The headlines don't lie. Armed robberies, violent robberies turn to sadistic beatings. Murders of innocent women and children. This is just a small sampling that shows crime and criminals are absolutely out of control. Something has to be done. Just in the last week, a man was released on parole only to kill a child and to stab the child's mother. This should make your blood boil. This is unacceptable in our society today. How can a community feel safe when a person deemed to be rehabilitated is released from the Illinois Department of Corrections only to immediately commit a heinous, brutal crime? One of the bills that we're working on is House Bill 4852. Known as the Community Protection Act. It would require that the Illinois Department of Corrections to provide written notification to the victim, to local law enforcement, and to the local state's attorney prior to the release of these offenders. Far too often under this dome, we forget about the victims. In the committees that I'm in, whether it's restorative justice, criminal, Jude criminal, the victims are often never spoken about. And when we bring them up, are told we'll get to them. They should be thought of first, because what gets done in this building under this dome often victimizes these victims again. Victims and the residents of these communities have the right to know who is being released back into their community. I urge my fellow assembly members to take the word of a third-year policeman to reverse course on all of our pro-criminal trajectory. I can confidently say the bills presented by this group will put us on a course that actually keeps innocent, tax-paying citizens safe. It's imperative that we start protecting the people that can't protect themselves. And with that, I'll turn it over to Representative Freese.
Thank you. My name is David Freese, State Rep for the 115th. I'm honored to join you today to talk about helping with recruitment and retention of law enforcement officers, and also with supporting our law enforcement agencies with the tools they need to protect the public. Great law enforcement begins with hiring and retaining great law enforcement officers. Let me repeat that. Great law enforcement begins with hiring great law enforcement officers. Let's be clear. The Safety Act has hurt law enforcement recruitment and retention in the state of Illinois. Numerous small towns, especially in central and southern Illinois, who once enjoyed local police officers patrol, now have closed their departments and have to rely on neighboring jurisdictions to provide law enforcement. Despite what often feels like a hostile law enforcement here in Illinois, House Republicans are working diligently to make sure our police officers know that we support them and ensure they have every tool they need to continue to be the thin blue line between safety and chaos in our communities. After the Safety Act passed, many departments have found a need to further incentivize officer recruitment and retention to find and keep great officers. These departments recognize this staffing emergency has real-life consequences on public protection and response times, and are seeking more tools to recruit the very best law enforcement professionals to Illinois. To help recruit and retain the best officers, we have introduced House Bill 5122 to create a $500 income tax credit for a taxpayer who serves as a full-time police officer, firefighter, or rescue worker. This is another way we can bring and keep good first responders here in Illinois. We also seek to improve the hiring and training process. House Bill 5123 requires the Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board to establish an annual basic recruit training program schedule which provides for monthly enrollment of recruits into training schools offering law enforcement or corrections training. These are steps we can take towards ensuring that we have the best trained police officers and that we can keep them on the job. Other states not just incentivize good officers to locate to their state, but those states also tend to support their work through improved public policy aimed at making it easier for them to stop crimes. Here in Illinois, we see a package of bills backing our law enforcement only rolled out by Republican legislators. Meantime, our colleagues across the aisle continue their assault on the tools needed for law enforcement to do their jobs well. Democrat legislators are entirely too eager to strip officers of their roles in protecting the public rather than seek to supplant good police work with good social work, when both are necessary to fix our societal ills. To that end, our caucus has done the work to actually listen to what law enforcement professionals are telling us they need. On behalf of our sheriffs throughout Illinois, our Truth in Public Safety Working Group further supports the following bills created by law enforcement to protect the public from crime. House Bill 5129 would update the clear and present danger notification system to be sent to local law enforcement instead of just state police, because it is frequently local law enforcement officers who respond to these calls, and they need that information at once. House Bill 5131 sets up a timeline for DHS to remove someone from the county jail within 20 days if they have been found unfit to stand trial, and requires reimbursement to the county if the person is held past the 20 days. This change would help our sheriffs by requiring DHS to reimburse the department for the housing and care of that individual. No longer should the state get away with warehousing the mentally ill in our county jails indefinitely. Jails are not the appropriate place for those individuals who need care and treatment that DHS is required to provide. Through HB 5133, we support allowing the creation of a county co-responder model which works with social workers to assist victims in need of mental or behavioral health services. The goal here is to supplement the tools for officers on the scene, not to supplant the important public safety work of our local enforcement professionals.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.
Well, good morning. What a great way to start with the conversation with Jack Williams and Jim Watson. Again, a fascinating discussion with Exxon and what their plans look like. It's now my pleasure to introduce our next guest. He really needs no introduction. Governor J.B. Pritzker, who's been governor of Illinois. He is now in his second term in office. As he likes to say, and you will certainly hear from him, he is the state's chief marketing officer. We have seen a resurgence in Illinois, in new jobs, in new job creation, and he has been a leader in the area of sustainability, and most particular in SAF production. I did a little research using AI, and we have had in this country about 2,391 governors in the history of the United States. And Governor J.B. Pritzker was the first governor to sign a SAF credit. So there's a little historical knowledge. He is committed to growing industry in Illinois, whether it's agriculture, manufacturing, transportation. You hear it from him every day as the chief marketing officer and the governor. Please join me in welcoming Governor J.B. Pritzker. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate you.
What a great way to wake up. Thank you very much, everybody, and it's really great to welcome all of you. Thank you so much to Mark. Thanks for your leadership and helping us bring industry to Illinois. I have to say that there's not a day that goes by that my administration isn't in some sort of dialogue with Mark and the Illinois Manufacturers Association as we're trying to build out existing industry, attract people to the state of Illinois, and of course, do our best to create new industries and build new industries. And some of you may know I was in the technology world before I became governor. I was a business person, and it was important to me back then to find great entrepreneurs and great new markets to invest in, and I feel the same way as governor, that it's the best way for us to expand our opportunity for the people of Illinois all across our state. And so I'm very pleased to be here among all of you in this industry as we see it burgeoning, and Illinois, of course, being a center, a hub for its development. I really am honored to be here as you all showcase the impressive new initiatives that you've taken on in sustainable aviation fuel. We're joined by so many amazing industry leaders this morning. You all have had a chance to get to know each other, I hope. But I want to just briefly mention some of the featured folks in the audience, and I'm going to miss people as I say this, so my apologies to anybody who I don't mention, but I do want to especially shout out to ADM, of course, one of our great companies in the state of Illinois, United Airlines, which is helping to lead among customers of sustainable aviation fuel, Marquis Sustainable Aviation Fuel, LanzaJet, ExxonMobil, members of our Illinois Manufacturers Association across the board, and the Illinois Corn Growers Association, and important industry players in other aspects, so like our partners at the University of Illinois and Northwestern and other higher education institutions. An important priority of mine has been to make Illinois a national leader in clean energy while harnessing the economic benefits across industries. And that's why I led the negotiations for the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act in our state a few years ago, transformative legislation which has put Illinois on the path to 100% clean energy by 2050. And we've continued to invest in Illinois' biomanufacturers, driving growth and innovation, attracting federal investment in Illinois for that, and of course helping to build our agriculture industry's integration into this next generation of clean energy. And that's why we're excited to be a leader in promoting a flourishing opportunity in sustainable aviation fuel. I want to be clear with all of you, there is no state that is better positioned to thrive in this industry than the state of Illinois. And I want to say that about 10 times over, but won't bore you with it, just to tell you that we have everything that people are looking for as you're building this industry. Illinois is home to a skilled biofuels workforce with 69,000 people employed in advanced biofuel manufacturing occupations, and that's only set to increase from here. From production and refining to retail, everything you need is here. We are the nation's #1 producer of soybeans, #2 producer of corn. We're responsible for 90% of the U.S. oilseed production, which leaves us with a wealth of feedstock supply. We're in the top 3 states for ethanol production, top 6 for feedstock production overall. Our geographic location, and I think this is an important point to make, our geographic location, our rebuilt and modernized infrastructure, we got at rebuilding our infrastructure a couple of years before the federal government started throwing money at the states. So we started out with $45 billion here, the largest infrastructure bill in the history of the state, and at the time the largest in the nation, $45 billion for rebuilding our roads and bridges and water ports and airports and broadband and so on. And then the federal government sent us another $20 billion. And so everything, as you drive the highways and byways of the state of Illinois and you see yellow or orange cones, people sometimes curse me. But I say sorry, not sorry, because it's an investment for decades to come that we're making. And again, that rebuilt infrastructure and the fact that we're the only state in the nation that has all 7 Class 1 railroads running through it makes us one of the most productive distribution hubs in the entire country. Illinois also boasts 9 international airports, including one of the most connected airports in the world, of course, Chicago's O'Hare International, along with one of the fastest growing cargo airports in the world. That's the Chicago Rockford International Airport, both of which are among the top 15 cargo airports in the United States. O'Hare alone sees 55 million passengers and 9 billion pounds of cargo each year, and our airport customer base continues to grow every day. As Illinois leverages its assets to lead in the sustainable aviation fuel industry, we are also helping to build the market, incentivizing the adoption of SAF. Last year, my partners in the General Assembly, and I really mean that, we've been partnered in this endeavor to build this industry, but my partners in the General Assembly and I passed a new $1.50 per gallon tax credit to support the use of SAF. We're also incentivizing investment in SAF production infrastructure and technology deployment in order to encourage private sector participation in SAF projects, to spur innovation, and to accelerate the transition to sustainable aviation fuels. And at the end of the day, Illinois is really ideally positioned to foster partnerships and drive innovation in sustainable aviation fuels. I want to point out that, again, because of what I did before I became governor, I'm very used to sitting down and making deals to build industry, to build jobs, to grow our economy overall. And I've tried hard to bring those skills to the job as governor every day. And so for companies that are in the audience here today that are thinking about where you're going to put your next facility, where you're going to find the next opportunity to build a bigger company, I want you to know that Illinois is open for business, and you ought to come see me in that endeavor. Our SAF ecosystem consists of strong research institutions, big customers, innovative startups, and a deliberately SAF-friendly regulatory environment. By leveraging industry leadership, local expertise, and agricultural resources, companies can accelerate the development and adoption of SAF technologies in Illinois and be part of a thriving, sustainable aviation fuel industry. So I'm really excited to welcome all of you here this morning and to offer the state of Illinois as a partner with you today and in the many years ahead of working with you. Thank you again for having me.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us here today. My name is Michael Frericks, I'm the Illinois State Treasurer, and joined by a couple of esteemed colleagues in the legislature and a parent and the head of AARP. And why are we here today? In the State Treasurer's office, we're in charge of college savings plans. We help families save money so that they have a brighter future for their kids. This is money that can be used for a university, a community college. It can be used for a vocational program or a technical school. We made changes so it can be used for an apprenticeship. Yet still, when I go out and talk about this program, a program that just recently Business Insider declared is the best 529 college savings program in the country, people find excuses for not saving. They say things like, well, what if my kid doesn't go to college or some post-secondary education? What if my kid is a genius or a star athlete and they get a full ride scholarship? Well, we have answers to those questions, but we now hopefully soon will have the ability to give them another reason to be saving in a 529 college savings account. The federal government in late 2022 passed a law that says states can allow their programs to roll money over from a 529, if it's unused, into a Roth IRA. Now, we all want a brighter future for our children. We all want them to succeed, but we also have aspirations for ourselves. And we want someday to be able to have a retirement with dignity. We want to work, we want the value that comes with work, but we someday want to be able to stop working and enjoy our golden years. So we think that this legislation passed by the federal government is great for two reasons. It encourages more people to save for their kids' future and allows planning for retirement as well. Unfortunately, state law only allows tax deductions on contributions 529 for certain approved expenses. And that's why I'm working with Senator Stadelman and Representative Blair Sherlock in the Senate and the House to change state law, to do something that we as a state, two things we want to do. We want more people saving, being financially secure, their kids getting a better education and graduating without being saddled with so much debt. And we also want families to be saving for their retirement. I do run into people as well who tell me that's not the state's business to save for retirement. That's their fault. It's their responsibility to save for retirement. And that's true. People are going to be saving their own money into these accounts. But if we don't make it easier for people to save, if we don't give them more incentives to save, and they're unable to retire, for young people entering the workforce, those are positions that won't become available. For people who decide to retire and are just living on Social Security, it's not enough to have a retirement with dignity. Those people's spending is going to fall off, and that's a problem for all of us who work in an economy driven by consumer spending. So this is, I think, sensible legislation to bring Illinois' laws in compliance with federal laws and allow people to save their own money to give their kids or themselves a brighter future. This only happens because we have legislators who understand these issues and are willing to fight on behalf of this. I'm joined by two of them here today. Our first up to speak will be Senator Steve Stadelman, the chief sponsor of Senate Bill 3133. Senator?
Thank you, Treasurer. You know, figuring out how to pay for a child's education is perhaps one of the biggest financial decisions a parent will have to make. And believe me, I know. I have 3 children in college this semester. That's right, 3 tuition payments this semester. If you see a nervous twitch, that's what I like to blame it on. So I'm certainly pleased to sponsor this initiative by the Treasurer's Office to give parents more flexibility and make it easier and more attractive to invest in their children's education. Many families are worried about having unused or leftover funds in 529 accounts and will now have another option what to do with that money. And parents can have increased comfort with their 529 plans by alleviating concerns about unintended taxation and allowing families to maximize the time value of the money. And as the Treasurer mentioned, it's a great way to help children build their retirement savings. I agree with the Treasurer. This is what parents want state government to do. They want us to help them out with their everyday needs, their children's education. This is what state government can do, and we're certainly very happy to help out. So I appreciate Treasurer Frericks and his staff's ongoing commitment to helping parents pay for their children's education. Just last year, a reminder, the Treasurer and lawmakers worked together to begin the First Steps program, which helps parents start the process of saving for their college costs. So all these efforts will help parents navigate the difficult decisions and how to best ensure their children can access higher education and reach their potential. So I'm very glad to be here and be a part of this wonderful effort. Am I introducing the representative, or you are?
Sure. Please take it away.
Okay. Good morning. I'm State Representative Diane Blair Sherlock, and I'm carrying House Bill 5005. And I was very excited to work with the Treasurer on this. I, too, have children in college. However, mine are now in grad school, so we're past that. But my kids have disabilities. And when I first started saving for them when they were infants, I didn't know for sure if they were going to go to college. And I think a lot of parents are in that position where they want to save, they want to do the right thing early on, but then as they learn that their children may not be able to go to college and they're stuck in this plan, what do? Well, now we have a good option for these parents. They can move this money into once we get it signed by the governor, I absolutely am confident it's going to pass, they can move the money into a Roth IRA, or I believe they already have the power to move it into an ABLE. Check out the ABLE accounts, they're amazing. But, you know, saving for your child's future education is responsible, and allowing leftover money to be used to help your child's retirement is a welcome change. And it should have happened a long time ago, right? So we need to get this done. We need to get this done now. And I believe that the House and Senate are both going to pass this overwhelmingly. And I appreciate the Treasurer's efforts, not just in this program, but in all the programs he manages. I just think he does an amazing job. And I'm very pleased to be able to work with his office on this. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Representative, thank you very much. Thank you for that optimism. I have been going down to Springfield to pass bills for the last 16 years, and I don't take anything for granted. As you go through the process, it is lengthy, and you sometimes find obstacles, individuals who have complaints. I do agree with you, though, that this is about giving people the tools they need to invest in themselves. And everyone should agree that we all want what's best for our children, whether that be giving them an education they will need to get a good job, or giving them the financial independence to be able to have a retirement when they are done working. That's a legacy parents want to leave for their children. We are joined today by a parent, and I was very excited to meet Dorlan Charles earlier today. She's a dynamic woman, but also excited because she brought her son with her here today. Her son, who was born 2 days after my sons were born, in the same hospital. So we were talking about a potential play date going forward. And while the boys play with each other, we can talk about the opportunities we have, the hopes we have for our children, and how we can help them to realize them. So she is a Bright Start investor. She's a saver. She has taken part in some of those great programs that the representative and the senator told you about, our First Steps program. I know she wants what's best for Xavier. And if he is successful enough to get one of those full ride scholarships, then this money will help make sure he has retirement for the rest of his life. So Dorlan, would you be willing to join us?
Thank you.
And if you wouldn't mind saying and spelling your name so that they happen.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Dorlan Charles, DorlanDeCharles. I am the social science principal consultant at the Illinois State Board of Education. I am an educator, and most importantly, I am Xavier Preston's mom. I am honored to speak to you all today about the importance of education and its impact on our lives and our children. As a parent, I consistently think about my son's future and how I can best prepare for him for the opportunities and the challenges that comes his way. Now, growing up in a Haitian traditional household, I was raised in valuing the 3 L's, l'école, l'église, l'école, which simply translates to home, school, and church. Malcolm X once said, "Education is an important element in the struggle for human rights. It is the means to help our children and our people to rediscover their identity and thereby increase their self-respect. Education is our passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs only to the people who prepare for it today." I couldn't agree more with this statement. Education is the key to unlocking a better future for our children, and we as parents are responsible for providing them with the tools and resources they need to succeed. That's why I started saving with Bright Start. I wanted to ensure that Xavier has every opportunity to achieve his goals and his dreams. Several years ago, I had a life-changing opportunity to study political science at one of the most prestigious historically Black colleges and universities, Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University. I was a first-generation college student with a fully funded private scholarship from my mom's boss, Harris Rosen. In college, I learned about the systems and theories behind political behavior, systems, governance, and public policy. I created my teaching philosophy with this knowledge and the skills I developed. I engaged in critical responsive teaching across 2 states, my home state of Florida and the great state of Illinois. I have enjoyed being a social studies educator and teaching hundreds of students. Watching Xavier grow and develop has been an incredible journey as a parent. He's only 9 months old, but I can already see how curious and eager he is to learn about the world around him. I cannot wait to see what he will accomplish in the future. My hope for his educational future is that he can pursue his passions and interests and have access to the best resource and opportunities that are available. I want him to feel empowered to impact the world positively and have the confidence to pursue his dreams while centering joy in his core values. In conclusion, I want to thank everyone who loves and supports my son. Thank you to Terry and Dustin and Yvette for educating me on Bright Start. Dustin, you were the very first donation I received, the $100 for Xavier's Bright Start Fund. I am thankful for the opportunities provided by Bright Start, and which gives parents like me a chance to invest in their child's education and future. Thank you so much.
This is why we do things like this. For parents, for children like Xavier, We were able to get this done with the help of great allies in the General Assembly and the Senate, but we also frequently have allies and friends who help us along the way. Many of our retirement initiatives, whether it be Secure Choice, changes to Secure Choice, have come from an organization that stands taller than any other when it comes to retirement security issues, AARP. And joining us today is the president of AARP, Al Hollenbeck. You have president right?
Yes.
Okay, great, good.
Well, good morning. My name is Al Hollenbeck, Hollenbeck. I am the state president of the Illinois AARP. I'm a little bit older than Xavier, and you're probably wondering, why AARP in support of this bill? Well, let me explain. According to our Vital Voices research of all Illinoisans 45 and over, 71% are very anxious about having enough money to live comfortably during retirement. 93% consider having enough income or savings to retire as their top economic concern. 93%. So we need more and easier methods for saving for retirement and for the future. These are needed to secure financial and retirement security. The importance of saving early and starting to build a nest egg for the future cannot be understated. It's for these reasons that I stand here today on behalf of our 1.7 million members. 1.7 million members. We strongly support this legislation, which when passed will have the dual benefit of helping Illinoisans secure their retirement funds while also encouraging more parents and grandparents, yes, grandparents, to help save for their loved ones' college future. In these trying times, we know every little bit helps to make sure older adults and their families can age as they choose. This is an opportunity to protect hard-earned savings families have worked so hard to put away. And it's also a great way for college students to get a head start on their retirement savings. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you all for being out here today. I think we have a great idea. I think we have great sponsors in Senator Stottleman and Representative Blair Sherlock. I think Dorlan provided a tremendous example, and I want to thank her for bringing Xavier today. He has been a source of joy for people here in this room. And I want to thank Al for AARP's continued advocacy on behalf of senior citizens and retirement security.
Wow, what a great turnout tonight. Thank you so much for coming out. I know we're all happy to just have air conditioning in here, but hopefully there's more reason than that as you came out tonight. It's truly an honor to be here. Thank you for that warm welcome and introduction. Thank you for the invitation to be here. Now, we're going to start, I'm amongst friends, and so I have a story to tell, and I don't even think Alan knows this, but I have to confess, I was here once before. It was a few years back. I was driving through Illinois. I was doing a series of speeches. It was probably Ronald Reagan's birthday. It must have been an unseasonably warm February because I'm not in a big coat. But we were driving through Springfield, and the person who was driving me, we drove right past the Abraham Lincoln Library, and I said, "We have to stop." And he said, "We don't have time to stop." And I said, "But we have to stop. I can't be this close. This may be my only chance to ever come here. We have to stop." And so we stopped, and he said, "Okay, you have about 10 minutes, and then I had to call into a radio interview." And so I was a little nervous when I showed up because I thought my face might be in the front. Have you seen this woman? Because I did my radio from your coat closet. I had the gentleman who was driving me stand guard, and again, it must have been a warm February because there were no coats in the closet at the moment. And so here I am at my first visit, and I have to say my second visit was much better even so far. I've had the red carpet treatment, but I did start my roots here at the Abraham Lincoln Library in your coat closet, which is very nice, by the way. I don't know if you've been in there, but you should try it. Anyway, it is such a thrill and an honor to be here. You have no idea what a privilege it is to speak in this beautiful and special place. To have this great place in your backyard, how special it is. I was always that nerdy little kid that loved presidents and politics and government. And if you grew up in the Beltway of Washington, D.C., that might be a normal thing. But I grew up in Southern California, which might as well have been a million miles from Washington, D.C. But every single book I could get my hands on about presidents and politics and the White House and first ladies, I couldn't get enough. If you've ever seen the movie Beauty and the Beast, I was Belle, showing up at the Fanning Elementary School library. Do you have any new books yet today about presidents? Nope, I'm sorry, Peggy, you've read every book in our collection. So never could I have imagined that my life would take a turn and that my life and my love for presidents would ever actually intersect a president. But my dad raised me to believe that somebody's got to have the job you want, and it might as well be you. And so in college, I took a chance. Ronald Reagan had just left office. He returned to Los Angeles. I was a senior at Pepperdine University. I was a communications major. The great communicator had just left the White House and landed in my backyard. So I took a chance. I wrote a letter to the office of Ronald Reagan, never even expecting to hear from them. They called me in for an interview. I was interviewed by Selena Jackson, who actually, Paul is a friend of his who was here tonight. What a small world to have him here tonight. But I was interviewed, and the rest kind of became history. I will tell you, that first meeting of Ronald Reagan did probably not go quite as I had planned. You would think that a girl who had dreamed about meeting a president would be perfectly prepared if that happened. And again, we're amongst friends, and so I'm going to read a very embarrassing story from my book, but it's been published, so I've had to kind of get over the embarrassment of it. But you'll see why I was a little embarrassed. So I go in for my interview. I'm so excited. I'm so nervous. And I think if I could just step foot on Ronald Reagan's office floor, what a thrill of a lifetime that would be. I grew up in a family of educators, no connections to politics, and just never even considered the fact that my life would intersect his. So here's what happened. I went in for the interview. I thought it went fairly well. And as I was leaving, here's almost like a dream state. It was so foreign to anything I had ever done or experienced, and yet somehow felt strangely familiar, as if this was all meant to be. The door nearest me suddenly swung open, and 4 Secret Service agents in suits and ties, with earpieces, radios, and guns holstered under their coats, walked hurriedly toward me. Did they know who I was? Did they know what I was doing there? Were they going to arrest me or shoot me? And then behind the lead agent, I saw 2 older gentlemen in golf attire. Wait, was it? Could it possibly be? It was President Ronald Reagan and his golf buddy for the day, Walter Annenberg. In all of my interview prep and planning, I don't know why it had never occurred to me that I might actually meet President Reagan. I didn't know what to do. I kind of panicked, and so I thought about what I would do if the flag were passing by. So I stood up straight, placing my hand over my heart. staring nobly and non-threateningly off into the distance. I am certain I looked completely ridiculous. But typical Ronald Reagan, instead of walking past me, he walked straight toward me. He looked me in the eye and extended his hand. I shook his hand and introduced myself. "Well, hello, Peggy. It's nice to meet you," said the 40th President of the United States of America. I had imagined him as a 10-foot-tall giant. After all, he had been a movie star, a governor, and President of the United States. He had tackled communism head-on, fixed the domestic economy, and solved many of the world's problems. And yet here he was, an ordinary man, just over 6 feet tall. His hair in pictures appeared jet black, but up close I saw touches of gray, evidence of his 78 years. He was ruddy and rosy-cheeked and full of life and happiness and vitality. His smile was more asymmetrical than I had ever noticed in photographs, and yet it was perfect in its imperfect way. And those eyes, a wonderful bright true blue and carrying so much joy. He was gone as quickly as he appeared, taking all the people, the energy, and the aura of power and importance with him. The office was suddenly eerily still. Selena, the woman who had interviewed me, then walked through that same door, grinning ear to ear, having witnessed my ridiculous salute. It's pretty incredible meeting him for the first time, isn't it? "You should have warned me," I said, still trembling inside. "No, it's much better this way." And though I felt I had horribly embarrassed myself, I had to agree. She then handed me the parking validation stickers and said I was going to wait until tomorrow to call you and leave you hanging in suspense for at least a while. But I already know that we want you to work with us here. So can you start on Monday? Yes, I could. I held it together until I was outside the building. I didn't know whether to shout for joy, cry, or drop to my knees in prayers of thanksgiving. I was so overwhelmed by all that had just happened that I started laughing out loud. The preposterousness of it all. Me, him, this office, Fox Plaza, Avenue of the Stars. We had met, he shook my hand. And now I work for him? I had no idea what Monday would hold, but I knew with confidence my life would never be the same after that day. And in fact, it had already changed. So that's a little peek inside the pages of the book, and what a fascinating process this has been writing this book. And actually, I have to credit your president, Abraham Lincoln, for part of this book, because I've traveled and spoken all over the nation and the world sharing stories of President Reagan. And for many, many years, people would come up to me afterwards and they'd say, "Oh, you have to write a book." And my standard reply was, "Oh, I don't think I'd ever write a book," because when you're given a position of closeness and proximity, there's something very personal and almost sacred about that, and I just wasn't sure how I felt about telling my story from such a close proximity. But after I'd spoken once in Washington, D.C. at the National Press Club, the head of the Presidential History Project out of the University of Virginia came up to me and asked me that question. "You must write a book." And I gave him the same stock answer, and he said something that completely changed my perspective. And he said, "If there was a woman who sat outside Abraham Lincoln's office door every day for 10 years, don't you think we would want to know what she saw, what she observed, what she learned, how it changed her life? And don't you think she would owe it to history to tell us?" I was a little convicted. I still wasn't going to write a book, but just through a crazy set of circumstances a few years later, it became clear that that was my path of what I was supposed to do. So I hope in the pages of the book that you will find that you can see the president and that he is there and accessible to see you now as well. So we're not going to talk politics. Are we all right with that? Are we all saturated with politics? All right, we're not going to go there at all. But we are going to look a little bit at what leadership looks like at the highest and best, and how Ronald Reagan was such a great example of how to lead and how to live a life of integrity, of patriotism, of inspiration, all the way to the end of his life. Okay, we're amongst friends. We can laugh at the hairstyles and the fashions of the 80s and 90s. It's okay. I'm confident in it. I have a son and 3 daughters, and now I actually have a daughter-in-law, and especially my daughters kind of cringe, like, "Mom, you wore that to the office? A sweater with shoulder pads? Welcome to the 1990s." Yes. But my job ran the spectrum. I started working for him in 1989. I was hired, as you heard, to work as an intern. I thought if I worked for him for 3 months, it would be the most exciting 3 months of my life as I was graduating from college. Fortunately, at the end of college, I was offered a full-time staff position. I started working for the chief of staff as his executive assistant. He now serves as the publisher of the Washington Post. So somebody that I learned a lot from, taught me how to be a very good executive assistant. And then Ronald Reagan's longtime executive assistant who had served him before he was governor retired. And they asked me to take that job. No small task, but one I was honored and thrilled to be asked to do. So my job ran the spectrum, everything from the glamorous to the not so glamorous. Interfacing with Buckingham Palace or the White House, to making sure the president had cash in his pocket if he wanted to get his hair cut, or toothpaste in his bathroom if he wanted to brush his teeth. Post-presidency, there was a small staff. There was hundreds that worked for him in the White House, and just a handful of us that worked for him post-presidency. And so I really got a great chance to interact with this man closely and personally over the course of the decade from 1989 to 1999, when he left the public eye. One of the things I love about Ronald Reagan is there were not two Ronald Reagans. I know a lot of people put him on a pedestal. He's one of those few people that you admire from afar, that when you met him in person, he was probably even better than you had imagined. Unfortunately, there's so many people we admire from afar, and sometimes we meet them, and aren't they sometimes a disappointment? That never was the case with Ronald Reagan. He was more charming, more warm, more gracious. Yes, ladies, he was more handsome in person. It's all right, my husband said, if I have to play second fiddle to somebody, it might as well be Ronald Reagan. But I loved the fact that his private and his public persona, there was no disconnect. I got to see when the cameras weren't rolling, when he thought nobody was watching, what he was really like. And I was always watching. And so it's just been a great pleasure and honor to share what it was like behind the scenes with Ronald Reagan. So looking back on my 10 years with him, it's interesting because when I went to write the book, I was trying to think, what are the moments that really stand out? And you would think it would be the star-studded black tie celebrity world leader type events. And actually when I really looked into my heart, it was those ordinary days, if you could call any day with the president ordinary, where this ordinary girl had wound up at the feet of this extraordinary man, and how even though I was very young and he was very elderly, we together found a great way to work together to accomplish things and to have a lot of fun and success along the way. Of course, there were historic signatures I witnessed, extraordinary opportunities. In fact, there's Selena and I in front of the Forbes jet. Paul, they're down over there. We're very Christmassy in the red and the green. But this was on the Forbes jet flying. There are moments that I look back on and think, how on earth did I get to fly private aircraft with Ronald Reagan, ride in Secret Service-driven motorcades? I almost look back at my pictures and pinch myself and say, was this all a dream, or was this really happening? And what a privilege to be part of that. One of my favorite roles was, though, being behind the lens of the camera all those post-presidency years. Again, we all wore lots of hats, and so if you came to President Reagan's office for a meeting or for a lunch, I would probably greet you in the front. I would brief you on the meeting. I would bring you in and introduce you to the president. I'd snap your pictures. In fact, there's a woman here who came to the office and has a picture that I snapped. If you were having lunch, I would bring in your lunch, and at the end of the meeting, I would clear your dishes. So it was just a wonderful opportunity to have all these roles, but I did love being behind the lens of the camera. First of all, he made me look like a great photographer because he never took a bad picture. It had to have been that acting ability in him. But it was fun because I got to be the ultimate fly on the wall. You think about, how do we get photos of private meetings? When everybody leaves, the photographer gets to stay. And so what a great opportunity in this book to be able to share some photos that have never been published of his post-presidency years with world leaders and ordinary Americans. And in fact, this cover photo I snapped one day. I walked into his office, and he always looked very handsome, but there was something about this day that was just extra special. I think it was the way the sun was coming in through the window. He was wearing this little polka dot tie, which I had never seen before, and he's got a golden California bear tie tack, and there was just something about this moment that almost took my breath away. And I walked in and I said, "Mr. President, you look especially handsome today. Do you mind if I take your picture?" "Well, all right," So I grabbed my camera, snapped this picture, and yes, I'll admit how old I am because it was back in the days of film cameras. So I snapped one picture, sent it off to the lab, got it back, a week or two later, and just loved the photo so much. I had it enlarged. You never say with Secret Service around that you had a photo blown up. You always say enlarged. I had the photo enlarged, and it hung above my desk for all the years that I worked there because I thought it just captured him so beautifully in those post-presidency years, warm and welcoming, as if he's waiting to see you. And so when I delved into this book writing process, I said, I have no idea what word one or title is going to be, but I know what photo I want on the cover. So how fun to not only have authored a book, but also to have a cover photo that I think captures him in those post-presidency years so beautifully. So behind the lens of the camera, I got to capture moments like this. Here he is touring Margaret Thatcher and Mrs. Reagan through his own presidential museum, which I'm sure a few of you have been to in Simi Valley. So moments before these big formal black tie events like this. And then I also got to capture moments like this after the event. If you can see, the ladies have their shoes kicked off in their stocking feet, and President Reagan has his eyes rolled in the back of his head like, stop talking so we can go home. So these were real people, and it was so fun to catch them in just those ordinary moments where everybody can relate to a picture and a moment like this. Ronald Reagan really changed my mind, especially as a young person, of what true diplomacy looks like. And Ronald Reagan's version of diplomacy looked a lot like relationships and not like rhetoric, and it didn't look political, it looked very personal. And we saw post-presidency this parade of people come from all over the world to pay tribute to him and to visit with him on a personal and social level, not because they had to for protocol and diplomatic reasons, but because they wanted to. They had a relationship with him that had begun either in his presidency, some of them even before that they really wanted to continue. And so from around the world they came. People like General Secretary Gorbachev, Prime Minister Nakasone from Japan, Chancellor Helmut Kohl from Germany, Prime Minister and Mrs. Brian Mulroney from Canada, President Lech Walesa from Poland, even Mother Teresa came from Calcutta, India. He changed my mind of what diplomacy really looks like, and diplomacy looks a lot like friendships, and how wonderful to see that at a young age. There was an authenticity about Ronald Reagan. He loved the pomp and circumstance of being president, but he also loved being up at his ranch in Southern California and would take people up there, like Margaret Thatcher. I don't think she quite owns ranch attire. Definitely did not come ready to ride out on the open range, but President and Mrs. Reagan, you can tell, were very comfortable and at home there. Here he is with Brian Mulroney bouncing around the back of a Secret Service beat-up old Suburban. Here he is with Mrs. Mulroney at the bottom, and I love that bottom photo because I was overhearing the ladies as they were talking, and Mrs. Mulroney, who's this very beautiful, very fashionable woman, leaned over to Mrs. Reagan and she said, well, Nancy, aren't you so cute and trendy in your boot-cut jeans? And she looked down and she said, these old things? I've been wearing these since the last time they were in fashion. Some of us can relate. I tell my kids every now and then, I throw something on and I say, this jacket is older than you are. But anyway, it's great to see that friendship. Of course, when Gorbachev came to the ranch, this was a great picture. That's actually Reagan is driving the Jeep. That's Gorbachev riding shotgun. His very nervous Secret Service agent is in the back with Gorbachev's interpreter. This man, when he was behind the wheel, you wanted to get off the road. He had not driven in 8 years, and so it was a little bit of a nail-biting time. But when Gorbachev was going to be visiting the ranch, one of my interesting tasks was he was going to give Gorbachev a cowboy hat. And so it seemed like a very straightforward assignment until I said, got to thinking about it. What size cowboy hat does Gorbachev wear? And back in the day, when you couldn't exactly email or Google it or anything like that, I would wait in the office until about 10 o'clock at night, till it was 8 o'clock in the morning in Moscow, call, hoping to find somebody who spoke a little bit of English, taking, back in the day of faxes, drawing a picture of a cowboy hat with an arrow and a question mark and a band, and trying, if any way, to get this hat size for Gorbachev so I could get the right hat for him. Finally, I get a number back and it's 60-something, and I'm thinking, that's not a hat size. And again, I couldn't exactly Google, convert Russian hat sizes to Western hat sizes, so I went to an equestrian center, which in and of itself is a feat to find in Los Angeles. Finally got a hat size, went and found a hat for Gorbachev, very nervous, hoping that it was actually the size. Ronald Reagan presents this hat to Gorbachev. He puts it on. You can tell the hat fits perfectly. I was very proud of myself. But my celebration was very short-lived because the next day Stetson called the office and said, "While we love that you featured our hat so prominently, do you know he put it on backwards?" It was out of my hands by then, but for those of you who know Ronald Reagan's story, you know he came from very humble beginnings. We picture him as president, and yet he came from very humble beginnings right here in central Illinois. And what I love about Ronald Reagan is that was never something he felt like he needed to overcome. I think he looked at the way he was raised and the foundation here in central Illinois as the foundation for everything he ultimately would become. He was born in 1911 in the middle of a snowstorm to a family that was very, very poor. His father was an alcoholic, and if you looked at the cards of life he had been dealt, you would have probably thought, this poor kid never has a chance. He'll never amount to anything. But he had a different plan, and God had a different plan for him as well. And I wanted to read you a quote that Ronald Reagan himself said about our other president here, President Lincoln, because I think that they had shared so much in common with their background, and you'll know why I picked this quote in a moment. Of course, Ronald Reagan never started just straightforward. He always had to tell a joke or a story, and so, of course, Ronald Reagan in this speech says, "Well, now we've gathered here to celebrate the life of Abraham Lincoln, and I suppose I'd better point out that despite what you may have heard, it's not true that Honest Abe and I went to school together." He goes on to say, Abe Lincoln was born in 1809 in a log cabin in the western wilds of Kentucky and spent his entire youth and boyhood in poverty, in frontier places where men hewed endless trees, forcing the forest with their own muscles to give up its poor land for crops, where women cooked over open fires and washed their clothes in creeks. Formal education was impossible, but young Lincoln pored over the few books he could find, studying the Bible in particular, probably the only book his family actually owned. And I'm sure you must have heard that sitting by the open fire as a boy, he would work out arithmetic problems with a piece of charcoal on a wooden shovel that was there by the fireplace. One important lesson that the life of Abraham Lincoln has to teach us is you don't have to be rich to love learning and to make something of yourself. And I think he looked at that great connection with Lincoln and again never saw something as his upbringing as something he needed to overcome, but the very foundation for everything he ultimately became. He always gave credit, of course, to God, but also to his mother. His mother was a great Christian woman, a woman of optimism and faith, who raised him to believe that God has a plan for everyone, and seemingly random twists of fate are all part of his plan, and in the end, everything will work out for the best. You can tell that regardless of your circumstances, if you were raised by a mother like that, how you can wind up being Ronald Reagan. And as much as we knew him, of course, as the great communicator, I think we also looked to him as the great optimist. There's a few people in this room who probably remember the 1970s. If you do, you remember taxes were high, inflation was high, unemployment was high, but worst of all, American morale was incredibly low. Ronald Reagan took office, and on day one, what did he start saying? It's morning in America. There's a new dawn ahead. There's a shining city on the hill, and we all get to be part of it. America's best days are yet ahead. In reality, not much was different in America on day one. And yet with optimism, and eventually with a successful plan of action, it changed everything. And if you asked Ronald Reagan at the end of his presidency what he was most proud of, it was not things he did or things he accomplished. He would say, I made the American people believe in themselves again. He was a great optimist. We were so eager to believe in ourselves again and believe in America, and he helped us do that. He was a man of incredible humility, which seems ironic for somebody who holds the highest office not only in the land, but arguably the most powerful office in the world. And yet he kept a sign on his desk that said there's no limit to what a man can do and where he can go, so long as he doesn't mind who gets the credit. That was not just a sign on his desk. That was the way he lived his life and was pretty much the way he expected those of us around him to serve as well. There was little things he did to show that this was a great man of awareness and appreciation and humility. Little things like reaching over and holding my elbow as we would go up and down stairs, which I thought was especially sweet since I was in my 20s and he was in his 80s, reaching over and steadying me as we would walk up and down stairs. And one of my favorite moments was early in the office, my office time there, we had set up his office for a big meeting and brought in a bunch of extra chairs and things, and at the end, one at a time, I was carrying these big, heavy wooden and leather chairs back to our conference room. And on one of my trips back and forth, I felt like somebody was following me, and I turned around, and sure enough, there was Ronald Reagan carrying a chair behind me. And I stopped and I said, "It's okay, Mr. President, I'll come back and get that." He put it down and he looked at me and he said, "What makes you think you can carry a chair any better than I can?" I said, "Okay, right this way." But just somebody who was always willing to jump in, step up, and help out, and just a great man of humility. He also had a great sense of humor. He used humor very strategically. Sometimes it was to make an important point, and he would do it in a way that was usually quippy and funny. He also used humor to put people at ease. You can imagine when people came to visit him, they were always very, very nervous, and so using humor would give him a way to help people relax. And as much as he took his role seriously, he never took himself too seriously, and that was a great, very endearing quality that people saw in him. He had great respect for presidents that came before him and presidents that came after him, regardless of party. He felt the importance of the office. He knew that he was a temporary steward of that office and felt the weight and the continuum of history, knowing that his footprint there was important, but that it was part of a larger story, and it wasn't an office that he owned, but he was just a temporary caretaker, and so was very respectful of the office of the presidency overall. He also had great respect for women. He talks about his mother as being the most important person in his early life. Of course, we know his incredible respect for Mrs. Reagan, the way he treated her. He respected Mother Teresa, this little tiny woman that he considered to be a giant on the world stage. And of course, he was most proud for being the president who put the first woman on the Supreme Court, and that was always something he was very, very proud of. He also was a man of incredible patriotism. Now, while that's something you would expect out of a president, it was something that came truly from his soul. And again, I got to see him at moments where he didn't think anybody was watching. The press wasn't there. The cameras weren't rolling. On birthdays or special occasions, we would invite people in to entertain him or perform for him. And inevitably, for a president, what do? Patriotic music. And so you would see him tapping his toe in time, singing along to every word, words to verses I didn't even know existed. He knew every word. Sometimes you'd see him stand out of respect. Sometimes you would look over and even see his eyes misting over with tears as he sang of our beloved America. He loved this country. I think he actually bled red, white, and blue. He was such a patriot. And he would even joke with Mrs. Reagan that there was another woman in his life. And he would talk about Lady Liberty as being that other woman. He was a man of immense gratitude. Here he is receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Bush in the White House. I snapped this photo on the plane on the way home, and it was a long flight from DC back to LA. And what I love about this, he took his coat off, but he left his medal on. Here's a man who's received every award, every medal, every trophy, every gold sticker and certificate. He always wins, right? He's the president. And yet it meant something to him. He never took for granted the blessing and the privilege of having been able to serve as president. And so this meant something to him. Also, what's he doing in this photo? Can you tell? We're on the way home from Washington, D.C. He takes pen to paper himself and is writing a letter thanking President Bush for the opportunity and the honor. Here's a man, of course, he had an assistant. I would have been happy to do that for him tomorrow. But he wanted to say what he wanted to say when he wanted to say it. And what a great example of discipline and living a life of complete gratitude. And as much as I love this picture, it actually kind of curses me too, because I fly and travel all the time. And so every time I get on the airplane, as much as I want to take a nap or do other things, I pull out my note cards and I sit and I write them first, because I think if this man can do it, I certainly can do it as well. One of my favorite gifts that I received over the years, you can imagine, when kings and princes and everybody came to visit, they would usually bring a little gift. I don't think it was a bribe. You know, it was post-presidency, so it didn't matter, but everybody was very good to the gatekeeper of the president. But my most treasured item I've received over the years was this, and if you can see, it's on gold embossed stationery. It says Ronald Reagan at the top. It's a cowboy doodle. I like to think maybe it was a self-portrait. And it says, "Merry Christmas to Peggy, Nancy, and Ronald Reagan." He gave this to me for Christmas one year, and as he presented it to me, he was a little bit apologetic, and he said, "Peggy, I wanted to do something more for you for Christmas, but you know you do all my shopping." And I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do something for you without involving you. Pre-Amazon Prime, pre-drone delivery, and so he took pen to paper and wrote this and presented it to me. And there's nothing I would treasure more. It's from his pen, from his heart, and such a great expression of gratitude to me. The world knew him for so many things. I knew him as a man of incredible kindness. This looks like a prom picture, but it's actually when I told him that that I had just gotten engaged to my husband, Greg, and so he was celebrating with us. I actually got married and had 3 of my 4 children while I was working for him. He was very patient through all those very challenging years, but was there to welcome my first, my son Taylor, my second, my daughter Courtney, my third, my daughter Paige, my fourth, my daughter Jocelyn. At which point one day Mrs. Reagan grabbed me by the arm, pulled me into the outer hallway of the office, and she said, "Peggy, you know how this is happening, right?" Not a conversation I wanted to have with the former First Lady or anybody, but for and no more. But over the course of the years, my kids had incredible opportunities to interact with the Reagans. And what I loved about their interaction with the Reagans is kids don't know or care if you're the president or if you're important or what your title is or how much money you're worth. Kids know one thing. Do you like them? And do you care about them? And my kids knew that Ronald Reagan and Mrs. Reagan as well loved them and cared about them. And what a great opportunity for my kids literally to grow up with these incredible people and to have such a personal relationship and to be welcomed into their home and swim in their pool. And one of my favorite moments is looking over at the Los Angeles Zoo, and there's Ronald Reagan pushing my son in the stroller, flanked by United States Secret Service. Kind of crazy. But for the kids, it was all very normal. I have taught my son better manners, but on the far side, he jumped up on the desk because he said he wanted to give the president a real hug, not a leg hug, because when you're 2, it's like right around the knees. So he climbed up on the desk and gave the president a hug, and you can tell the president does not mind. But for the kids, it was all very normal. They would look at me dressed up in the evening, and my son would say, "Mommy, are you having dinner tonight with Daddy or the president?" And back pre-9/11, my husband would drive out on the tarmac to drop me off as we were flying off to someplace, and Taylor, my son, would sit on the hood of the car, and before President Reagan boarded the plane, he would always make a little turn and come over and say hello to Taylor. So really special that my kids grew up with these incredible people. Now, to make you further jealous, my husband, any golfers in here? Actually got to play golf with President Reagan fairly regularly. As the president's friends got older, some of them stopped playing golf or would go to the desert for the weekend. And so every now and then on Friday afternoon, the phone would ring. And the first time I was a little worried about it because it was Mrs. Reagan and she called to ask for my husband, Greg. I was wondering what they were conspiring about. But of course, Greg agreed on the phone and then hung up and he said, "Peggy, Mrs. Reagan asked if I would please be Ronnie's 4th for tomorrow. And so as much as I would love to do the honey-do list of chores tomorrow, and I couldn't wait to mow the lawn, duty calls. I must go serve my country. I must go play golf with Ronald Reagan." So over the course of the years, my husband got to play golf with President Reagan countless times, and what a great experience for him to be out on the golf course. And I have to say, some of the stories he would come back with, I would look at him and think, the president said that? Because he was very respectful, always in front of women, but out on the golf course, you know, maybe there were a few stories that I had not heard in the office. But a great opportunity for him as well. And really everything I ever needed to learn about how to lead and how to live, I learned from this man, and not from a list of things he gave me, but just by how he lived his life. And one of the greatest takeaways from his life is that your legacy is not written after you're gone. It's written with every single day of your life. And for all of us, what a great reminder that we should live and we should lead and live as if our legacy depends upon it, because it does. I got to see Ronald Reagan's legacy play out every single day, behind the scenes in the office when he thought nobody was watching, and I always was. Every day when he stepped out into the world and we would see how the world interacted with him, he was writing the legacy of his life. Out of all the 10 years that I served for him, there's a couple of moments that really stand out when you think about all of them, that he was writing the legacy of his life and had a front row seat to watch it. One, there was a little boy who was suffering with the effects of autism. He had Asperger's syndrome. He had memorized every single fact about Ronald Reagan, and his family had written into the office and asked if he could come in and see him. And so they came in, and of course the parents were very, very nervous, but I told them, don't worry about it, the president will be great with him. And to watch this little boy kind of quizzing Ronald Reagan about his life, and sometimes telling the president, no, you got that wrong, that's not what it said in the book I read. And watching this sweet, sweet interaction between this little boy and this elder statesman, Ronald Reagan was writing the legacy of his life by the way he lived. There was a Secret Serviceman that came in who had stood post outside Ronald Reagan's office door every day for 8 years. Had never really met him except for a receiving line, and wrote in, asked for an opportunity to meet with him. So of course we agreed. And as he came in, he said, Mr. President, it was such a privilege to stand outside your bedroom window every night, because I knew if I protected you during the night and if you could get a good night's sleep, you would be able to make better decisions for our country the next day. Thank you so much for the opportunity to serve you.